Kia ora te whānau, and welcome back. It's Sunday here in New Zealand, and they don't call this place the land of the long white cloud for nothing. We've had at least a week of rain, which is good for the farm, but you know, sometimes it dampens the soul a wee bit. I wanted to raise a point at the end and ask a question of all my brothers out there at the end of this video. Have you ever heard the sound of a click when there should have been a bang? You know, most of life a mechanical failure is an inconvenience. You know, your car won't start or you're late for work. Your laptop freezes and you lose a document. But you know, in the bush, in the white hot intensity of a running contact, that click is the sound of the universe closing a door. You know, it's the most terrifying silence a man will ever experience. We talk a lot about the trackers, you know, we talk about the operators, the guys, on the ground following the spoor until their feet bleed. We talk about the aggression and the speed of the pursuit, but today I want to talk about the men who made sure that, you know, when the pursuit ended and the lead started flying, the machine actually worked. I'm talking about the armourers, right, the men of the SAP Technical Services or the Tegniese Dienste, the guys who understood what we called the discipline of the track. You have to understand the environment, right? This wasn't a clean laboratory. This was the Koevoet, right, of Umberland. It had this fine, talcum powder dust that found its way into every seal, every bolt, and every firing pin. It was it was heat that could cook an egg on the hull of a Casspir, and you know, in that environment, metal wants to fail. You know, it just wants to seize up. The backbone of the unit's teeth wasn't just the courage of the crews, it was the relentless, greasy, back-breaking work that was done in the workshops of Oshakati, Rundu and Apua. When a Zulu team came back from a week in the bush, they were spent. You know, the men were haggard, the Casspirs were battered, and the weaponry was fouled with carbon and grit. While most of the world thinks that a soldier's rest is about sleep, for a Koevoet team, the week out was about the ritual of maintenance. You know, we called it the midweek routine. It was a strip down of the soul. Everything came off the mounts, you know, the 50 cal Brownings, the twin 7.62 Brownings, and the heavy hitters, you know, those 20 mil Hispano cannons that I talked about earlier. That kind of gave us that overwhelming fire superiority. You'd see guys sitting on ammunition crates, you know, meticulously sorting through links. You know, you think that's tedious? Try having a belt-fed weapon jam because, you've got a corroded link or a single grain of sand tucked into a brass casing somewhere. The armourers at the base, you know, they were the masters of this chaos. They didn't just maintain South African gear either. They were technical wizards of the Cold War. You know, they had to know the Victor R5 and R4 inside out. You know, that compact little beast was the lifeline inside those cramped hulls of those Casspirs, you know. But they also had to be experts in the weapons, the enemy's weapons, right, and tools. We used captured AKs, PKMs, and RPGs because, you know, sometimes the best tool for the job is the one that you took from a man that doesn't need it anymore. And, you know, then there was the FN MAG, you know, the GPMG 7.62 NATO. That weapon is a masterpiece of Belgian engineering, you know. A belt-fed general-purpose machine gun that could lay down suppressor fire until the barrels glowed. But even a legend like the MAG needs a steady hand to keep it running at 650 to 1,000 rounds a minute, you know. The armourers ensured that those gas settings were perfect and the disintegrating links were clean, because when you're providing cover for a team on the ground, you know, good enough is a death sentence. I remember the Zulu Romeo guys as well, the radio techs. People forget that communication is a weapon too. You know, if your radio goes down, right, you're an island. You're alone in a very big, very hostile ocean. Those techs work side by side with the armourers, you know, ensuring the pulse of the unit, you know, the comms and the cannons they never skipped a beat. And let's not forget the logistics chain. You know, we had a couple of vehicles called the Blessbook and the Dacre. One was a mine-protected cargo carrier, and the other one was a fuel buzzer. But those were the arteries, you know, they carried the ammo, the spares, the diesel, and our food. An armourer can't fix a gun if he doesn't have the parts, and a gun can't fire if it doesn't have the correct ammo. It was a symphony of grease, steel, and, you know, logistical grit. Why am I telling you this, though? You know, why does this matter 40 years later, you know? Because there's a deep masculine philosophy in the role of the armourer, right? It's about the unseen excellence, right? The armourer doesn't get the medals for the contact. He isn't the one featured in the dramatic photos of the pursuit. But his work is the foundation upon which everything else is built, right? It's a lesson for life, you know? We all want to be the one pulling the trigger, right? We all want the glory of the contact, but most of life is the midweek routine. Most of life is sorting through the links, cleaning the carbon off the firing pin, and ensuring that your machine, your mind, your body, your family, your business is ready for the moment of truth. The discipline of the track wasn't just about following footprints in the sand, it was about the discipline of the workshop. It was the understanding that your life and the lives of your brothers depended on the integrity of your equipment. So if you're watching this, I want you to look at your own weaponry. What are the tools you rely on to provide for your family and protect your peace? Have you let the dust of the world settle in on the gears? Have you been lazy with your links? The armourers of Koevoet knew that reliability is a form of respect, respect for the mission, respect for the men to your left and the men to your right. They worked in the shadows of the Oshakati hangar so, that the men in the sun had a fighting chance. In the end, we're all armourers of our own lives. We're responsible for the maintenance of our character and our honour. Don't wait for the click to realise that you should have been cleaning your gear. Stay sharp, stay disciplined, and keep your teeth ready. Ka kite anō. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening. See you all next time.